Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary with a knife video. I've got a really cool blade today, and one that I feel very fortunate to have in my collection because I've been interested in this knife for some time and they're not that easy to find. And so when I found this one for sale a few weeks ago, I right away said, hey, I'll take it. And I've been very, very impressed with this knife. This is a George Talos. It is a midtech design, and it also happens to be the design that the zero tolerance for this year, the 909, is based on. Okay, so this is the real deal, and you know the production collaboration is the ZT 909. Frankly, there are a lot of things on this knife that I prefer over the 909. I like that it's thumb studs. I like that it is washers instead. About the only thing that I would say could change about this knife, even though it's extremely functional, is the clip. And if you did not like this clip, now I've carried this a lot and I have no problems with this clip. I'm not complaining or saying that this is a negative, but I think the deep carry clip on the 0909 is a nice option. Now let me say, I know we're still in the introduction and we haven't gotten to the point of talking about the handle and the clip yet, but the 3-hole pattern here is the same that's used on Emerson's, so you can go on eBay and do any kind of aftermarket deep carry clip you might be interested in. So let's go ahead and get into the size and weight on this. This knife is 8.5 inches overall. The blade is 3 3/4 inches. The handle is 4 3/4 inches. It's 1/2 inch thick, and it weighs 6.2 ounces. So fairly well-built knife. There's a bit of heft there, but at 6.2 ounces, and I've said this before, that to me is not too heavy to carry at all. And I've carried this lots of times and I have no issue at all with that weight. Let me pull in a couple of comparisons for you. One knife that I actually think, would compare fairly well to this in terms of, where it fits in terms of philosophy of use type of stuff, is the Ferrum Forge Ferrex. Okay, so another sort of hard use knife, and again another knife that I think is a well done hard use knife. It's a knife that, yes, it fits all those overbuilt criteria, but it cuts really well and it's not too heavy to carry and it's very comfortable and ergonomic. And so because of all of those things, I think it's sort of hard use done right, and I would say the same thing about this one. All right, one other comparison for you, and I thought I'd bring a ZT in. This is the 0560. Number one, it's a very popular ZT. Number two, I think for those of you watching this who would say, Kevin, the mid-techs are just a little out of my price range, or maybe a lot out of my price range, ZT is pretty well the most affordable production knife that's going to come close to the quality of a mid-tech. Okay, now there are others, Custom Knife Factory or Riyadh or some of the other high-end Chinese knife companies. Those companies, yeah, they're achieving this level of quality and fit and finish, but the price is almost the same anyway. Okay, so that's a bit of a that sort of changes the whole balance there. All right, so let's get back to the actual knife in question and focus in a little bit on some of the details here as we kind of go through the knife. Let me move out of the way and zoom in for you. There you go. So there is the George Talos in a little more close-up view. Okay, turn it around here for you so you can get a good look at it. You can see that it's fairly plain. And that's kind of a cool feature. It really, I think, puts it into sort of that hard use utility category. It makes it a high-end knife that is very tough and very usable, that you're not worried every time you take it out to cut something. And of course, the stonewash finish has a lot to do with that as well. Let's start off with the blade, which is what we always do. This blade, you sort of got a drop point blade. You could almost, kind of clip point with a top swedge and a very high flat grind. Okay, it does terminate here in a very pointy tip, and it does have this nice thumb ramp. which kind of creates a cool design feature. Okay, the look of this, yes, it's very less George, but it also, it makes a knife that just has a different look to it. And right away, for example, you see this knife, or you see the VECP, or you see the 909, or you even see the last year's very small Les George collab, and I just can't think of the model number on that one right now. But all of those knives, right away you look at it and you go, it's a Les George design. And the same is true of this knife. Okay, so stonewash finish, a really, really attractive stonewash finish, very high flat grind. And what I've got to say about this blade, and this is typical of midtechs, guys, it is extremely well done. The choil here is exactly right. The edge geometry is very, very good. Now, sometimes you'll see in midtech knives an extreme, okay, the maker's going for a particular type of performance. This is pretty well balanced, okay? This is a blade that gives you a nice amount of belly, some straight edge there. You can literally do everything with this. You could use it in the bush for camp tasks, or some wood processing. Obviously I wouldn't baton with a folder, but you could certainly, this knife, the edge geometry and the durability and the comfort on this knife, you could do a lot of carving and make feather sticks and that kind of stuff really, really well. In addition, this knife is also well balanced as a sort of a defensive blade, okay? If you ever needed to use this as a weapon, which hopefully you never ever would, certainly it's pointy enough and it's got enough belly that it's going to slash very nicely, okay? So what's cool about this blade, maybe even more so than this one, is that it's extremely versatile. Okay, this blade shape can really do a lot. The edge geometry is very good. It's just a great balance. And I've said this about a lot of knives, and knives that I really like are knives that achieve this balance between being very tough but also very usable. And this blade really does that. It's nice thick blade stock. It's also very, very or it's also not very, very, but it's also thin enough behind the edge that it can slice really well. And whether you're cutting, meat for supper or cardboard or whatever else you may be doing, this is a blade that does those jobs really, really well. One of the cool things I did find is that there is a little less material out here at the tip. So if you're doing something that requires maybe more slicing, you can kind of move your cutting task out the blade. And the design on this knife allows you to kind of move your hand out there and do this work with this part of the blade where it's fairly thin, so you can get a lot of cutting done out there with that. And that's one of the advantages, and I've complained about this before on other knives. I like the top swedge, but I like them to leave me this first portion of the blade here, so that if I want to get my thumb out here and do some detailed cutting work, I can do that. And this blade certainly allows for that. So the blade, CTS XHP blade steel, by the way, very, very good. Now, let's carry on with the rest of the knife and talk about lockup and deployment. You can see right away that it is a thumb stud, and the thumb stud is a screw-in stud, so I guess you could sort of flip this around, but the pocket clip is only right side tip up, so there wouldn't be much reason to change the orientation of the thumb stud to a left-hand favored position. Okay, but what I've got to say about this is it is amazingly, amazingly smooth. Okay, this is a knife that just feels, I don't know. I've had a lot of really smooth knives, and especially it's impressive with washers. I would compare this to some of the very best and smoothest, whether it be the Gale Bradley, which I find exceptionally smooth, or a Sabenza, or even I have a paramilitary 2 in S35 VN that is just amazing. It's the smoothest pair of 2 I've ever seen, and I would compare this favorably to any or all of those. It's just really, really well done. You can flip it out, although I'm having a hard time doing it on camera. In normal, normal use around the house, I've done this hundreds of times and never had a problem. Of course, as soon as you turn the camera on, you're always going to have issues. But it is adjustable here, so if it was too tight or too loose, you could easily, make adjustments for that. Now, one thing I will say is the precision on this is very good. So, you're not going to have to, make a major, half a turn or a quarter of a turn or even an eighth of a turn. You're going to notice a difference in how that blade feels. Okay, so let's see. That's Lockup. Oh yeah, let's carry on over here to the Lockbar. You can see that the engagement is fairly early, maybe 25% or 30% or so. I'm trying to get an angle where you can see that very well. And you can see, if I turn the knife this way, you can see this little bit of the lock bar over here, which is allowing you to get access to that and disengage that lock. Okay, so lockup and deployment, extremely solid. And this is one of those things, guys, on a mid-tech knife, I've never really seen one. I've heard stories about lockups that weren't good, but I've never had one myself. And generally speaking, you're going to get better performance because of the fact that, someone is putting this together by hand. So your knife is going to be touched by human hands and interacted with. And I know there are production knives where they're all touched by human hands, but there are those that aren't, where it's just purely a bunch of robots putting everything together. So extremely solid lockup and deployment, and just really smooth. By the way, guys, I love the fact that this is washers and not bearings. I think washers demand a higher level of excellence, a higher level of precision for them to work properly. And so when you get a knife that's on washers that's as smooth as this one, you've got to give some credit where credit is due. Okay, so moving on to the handle. And the handle is one of the things that I've got to say is, if not as, as impressive as the blade, maybe even more impressive than the blade. It does have this chamfering all the way around, and I've got to tell you that the ergonomics on this knife are one of the closest knives to perfect that I have ever felt. It's just super comfortable. When you close your hand on this, it feels like it's just meant to be in your hand. It feels absolutely perfect. And that's largely because everything is so rounded and so smooth. Now, here's one of the things that I have, griped about before. There's no substantial jimping. There's a little bit of jimping here, but what's awesome is that when you grip this thing, it is locked in. And the way that lock-in is achieved, the way that retention is achieved, is because of the shape of this handle. It just really, it's like when you grab the knife just grabs you back. And I really like knives that try to do that, where they don't depend on putting a whole bunch of jimping and texturing everywhere, where they try to depend more on getting the handle shape right so that it locks into a human hand. And that's what they've done with this handle. In fact, I've talked about how comfortable this knife is and how much I really like the ergonomics on it. This is considerably more comfortable, and even more comfortable than this, which I've often said is one of my most ergonomic knives. This is a very comfortable knife, but again, not as comfortable as this one. So, would I go so far as to say this is my most comfortable knife? The only one I can think of that beats it would maybe be this, the Ultimate Hunter, where you've got that really nicely rounded G10. This is extremely comfortable and extremely ergonomic as well. Very different knife, of course, but just kind of giving you some comparisons in terms of knives that I have found to be extremely comfortable, and this one just really gets it. Okay, so comfortable, useful, tough as nails. All of the things that I look for in a knife. In addition to that, extremely well made, and allows you to really use a knife without being sort of fearful about putting a scratch or something on it because of that really nice stonewash finish. Let's finally talk a little bit about the clip and the construction. You can see it's open pillar construction. These screws, by the way, go all the way through. So the screws here, the two Torx screws, if you look on this side, see how there's no screw head? It's one long screw going all the way through the standoff into the other scale. All right. And the pocket clip, let's talk about the pocket clip last. This spring clip is just extremely well done. It goes in and out of pocket just the way you want it to. The only thing I would say about it is it's maybe a little bit plain, but guess what? You can actually, this was thought out. This is the same 3-hole pattern that's used on Emerson knives. So if you go on, eBay or Blade Forums or USN or something like that, lots of those places have makers who make aftermarket titanium pocket clips that can be deep carry, they can be decorative, they can be anodized all kinds of different colors. So this clip is specifically designed to be able to be changed out, and you can do various different things with it. One last comment that I would like to make about this, and that is that this is a knife that's sort of a blank slate. Okay, if you like it this way, that's awesome. And I kind of, maybe I'm a bit of a purist in this way, but I really like the stonewashed titanium. I love the way the blade and the handle go match together so well. But you certainly wouldn't have to do that. I think this would look great in a bronze anodized or blue anodized. I don't think I'd be into, but a bronze anodizing on this would look really, really cool, especially if you did sort of bronze and then some other color for the clip. Okay, just would really, really make this knife exceptional. Anyway, the point is there are tons of options. You could buy this, have it drop shipped to various different guys who do really good anodizing work, and have sort of a knife that's extremely well made, but then is now also unique to you. So there you go, guys. That's my sort of overall description or take on the George Talos. Exceptionally well done. I would compare this favorably to any of the high-end production knives that are out there, whether you want to talk about Hinderer or Sebenza or Strider, and even with a lot of the really nice midtechs that I've had before. So really, really good knife. Very sort of robust, but also useful. This really nice balance. And I love when knives just nail that balance between usability and durability and toughness and, being tactical, but also practical. It's just a really, really well-rounded knife. One last thing that I feel like I should say is that the price on these is fairly reasonable when it comes to midtech. So if you're into midtech knives, or if you'd like to be into midtech knives and you always think, man, I looked at a Ferrum Forge and they start at like 600 and go up, and I've looked at this, you may be able to find a Talos for around $400. And that's, I think they sell for $425, maybe brand new. And so, maybe for $100 less, you can pick up a used one. And that's pretty good, right? I think that's a good value for what you're getting out of this knife as well. All right, guys, that's my take on the George Talos. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we will talk to you soon.